Hey guys, welcome back to the Pauper metagame. This is MSP. I wanted to take a minute to respond to one of the criticisms of Pauper. There's a lot of people who are getting excited about Pauper and jumping in even for the first time. There's other people who may have tinkered with it and they're revving up a bit and getting more into it. And there's people all across the spectrum. There's also people who criticize Pauper as a flash in the pan, a fan, a format that has no real substance or staying power. And maybe each week or once every couple of weeks or maybe a couple times each week I will respond to different criticisms. I put up a video yesterday where I hashed out a bunch of different arguments, and I realized that a lot of these different discussions are more elaborate than you can jam all into one video. So I want to take this in a more piecemeal fashion and break down some different criticisms and respond to those criticisms and just keep it to one particular criticism. So today's issue is there's a number of people who are saying that the only reason that Pauper has taken off is because of the professor. And Pauper is only going to stick around and last as long as the professor is talking about it. But if the professor gets bored with Pauper and moves on to something else, Pauper is done for. Or alternatively, some people would say the only reason that some of these Pauper side events are doing well is because the professor is showing up and playing at them, and once he stops doing that, these Pauper events are just going to fizzle and fade, and that's going to be that. Well, that's all completely wrong. Let me unpack that a little bit. Now, first of all, let me just say this up front. The professor deserves a lot of credit. Let me just also throw this in as an aside. I know that Unsleeved Media has come after the professor. That's a YouTube channel. I believe Jeremy is the name of the individual who runs it. I have nothing against Jeremy or his channel. He's got a real magic channel, and I just have my little rinky-dink thing here. And I'm not even saying he's wrong in whatever he's been saying or whatever. I don't know. I haven't gotten into all that stuff, but I know there's been some drama. And I'm not privy. I haven't really dug into all that enough to really say much. The professor, on the other hand, is just, you can tell he's a nice guy and he's supporting Pauper. And again, I know that the Jeremy people out there would say, well, the professor has nefarious motives or whatever. I highly doubt that. But whatever the professor's motives are, I'm just really glad the professor has taken the time to kind of spread word about what a cool format Pauper is. I'm very grateful. I'm very thankful to the professor. And frankly, I think that whatever talking heads or opinion people you watch on the internet when it comes to Magic, whatever side you've chosen or whatever the case may be in any of the ongoing drama, you can take a step back and set all that aside and just say, hey, Pauper's a sweet format, and I'm really glad the professor is supporting it. That's rational. Let's take this a step further. WotC, Wizards of the Coast, if you will, should have... Oh, I guess I should pause here for a minute and explain. I'm actually just kind of putting some cards into CardSphere right now while I'm recording this video. What I'm doing here, it doesn't really have much to do with what I'm talking about. I'm putting a bunch of cards into CardSphere. If you don't know much about CardSphere, let me first say I'm not being compensated by CardSphere in any way. I mean, I've got like one subscriber on my channel right now, so why would CardSphere give me anything for the hardly anybody that'll even see this? Second of all, I just like CardSphere and I wanted to talk about it because it's a great way to trade stuff out. Like if you've got a bunch of $2, $3, I mean, as you can see, I'm putting in a bunch of what a lot of people would consider to be bulk rares, but maybe I can find somebody who will want 5, 6 of these. I trade those out, and then I'm able to pick up some Pauper commons as well. It's just a good way to kind of trade your jank for jank. This is also a site where you can trade some expensive, valuable cards. I like it. I think it's better than Puka Trade because Puka Trade's been going downhill because of problems with Puka points, whereas CardSphere is a site that operates on real money. And I just like CardSphere, so check it out, do some research, see if it's for you, and let me get back to the topic at hand. So Wizards of the Coast should have paid attention to Pauper and more further legitimized Pauper in terms of allowing sanctioned events in paper years ago. Now, to WotC's credit, they have embraced Pauper online, and that's something that I give them credit for. However, let's be honest, Wizards of the Coast makes a lot of bumbling bad decisions. They don't always pay attention to things that they should, and they're not always the best at managing the fabulous game that they have in their hands to control. What the professor did is he brought attention to something that should have been done a long time ago. So the people who will say that, well, Pauper's really only a thing because of the professor, what you need to understand is Pauper is something that Wizards should have acted on long ago. The professor had the keen ability to recognize that Pauper is a very good and legitimate format that should be more fully acknowledged by Wizards. So all the professor was doing was pushing Wizards to do something that they should have done a long time ago. All the professor was doing was acknowledging something that Wizards was too blind to see. And the professor has a channel where he's very honest and upfront about creating content that his viewers will hopefully enjoy. The professor, I don't think, is in the business of talking about subjects that nobody cares about. So if Pauper was a format that was really, really silly and fringe and had no following at all, or if it didn't have huge potential or something, the professor's not going to produce a video that's frankly not going to get any views, or if he does, he might do it as a novelty every once in a while. Part of the reason that the professor, quote-unquote, pushes Pauper is because it's a format that people are interested in. When he produces Pauper videos, they get views. Some people will say that, well, anything the professor does will get views. I don't know about that. I'm not really sure that people would be really interested in seeing a lot of videos about Canadian Highlander. No offense to Canadian Highlander, it's a fine format and all, but there just really isn't that kind of interest there. So anyway, all I'm saying is if you think that the professor is a shrewd operator of his channel, then he's probably more likely to tap into some area that has a lot of following but has perhaps been not as covered as it should be. Tap into that niche but high area of potential and reap the rewards of getting a solid following based on that. But this means he's not just creating it out of nothing. He's tapping into something. And that is also to the professor's credit. So what does this mean? It means if Wizards will actually get off their duff and sanction Pauper events in paper, that's it. That's when the floodgates open up. Right now, this is really not even really much of anything, even though people are saying, oh my gosh, this is crazy, 302 people at a side event. That's really not any big deal. The big deal is going to be if this creates enough momentum to get Wizards to say, you know what, what's it going to hurt? Let's go ahead and just say this Pauper thing can be a real sanctioned event. If a store, and Wizards could even put a restriction on it. Wizards would say, look, store owners, you're not allowed to have Pauper for Friday Night Magic. Okay, that's fine. As long as stores can run sanctioned events on other days or nights of the week where they can do Pauper's going to explode. It's going to make this, couple hundred, 300 people at a side event at a GP look like peanuts compared to the explosion that Pauper is going to have. And I'm not saying the momentum right now is insignificant. It is important because that is what could pave the way for Pauper to actually become a sanctioned format. That has got to be the goal. Anyone that's really a supporter of Pauper, you got to keep your eye on the prize, as they say. And whenever you're talking to other players, talking to store owners, talking to anyone, you just want to remember the number one goal that we have as Pauper players should be to push Wizards to give us a actual sanctioned format. So for example, if you're going to have like a Twitter campaign or something like that, that should be the real call. So basically, when you boil it all down, the professor is doing a huge service to Pauper, but all he's doing is taking something that hasn't been recognized, that should have been recognized for a long time. It's a little bit like the difference between having an employee at a business who's only getting recognized because, they're friends with the boss, versus having an employee who's been working hard and doing a great job for years, but the management's too stupid to recognize it, and then a more capable manager comes in, assesses things, and says, holy crap, we have an employee who's been absolutely rock solid, that's never really been acknowledged, hasn't been given a raise in years, has never been given out the Employee of the Month award or whatever. And that's all the professor is he's coming in and he's doing the intelligent, rational, competent thing that should have been done a long time ago. And I'm very hopeful that this is actually going to lead to the sanctioning of Pauper. And when that happens, it's going to get really interesting, because Pauper has a lot that it brings to the table for a lot of these stores and for Wizards in general. You hear a lot of people talk about, well, how's Pauper going to help Wizards' bottom line? Well, let's get real, people. What actually matters in any game isn't just the people who buy the most expensive components of the game. A big part of your game is how many people are paying attention to it, how many people are playing it. Look at all the free-to-play games out there that have these whales that spend tons of money, and there's all these people that just play for free. They don't put anything in. But if you ask the free-to-play companies, hey, all your focus and attention is just on the whales, you could care less about all these other people, right? I mean, they'll laugh at you. They'll say, yeah, the whales are what we're really after, but you got to remember, to keep the whales interested, the bigger the player base, the more whales we get, and the more our current whales will stick around. Because if somebody wants to be a high roller who's impressing everybody, well, if nobody's playing your game, who is there to impress? They're going to move on to some other game that's more popular. And once they move on to that more popular game, they're going to spend all their money over there. What I'm saying is, if you increase the base of players in Magic the Gathering, even if they're just spending next to nothing, that is very important, because it's still more people talking about Magic, more people tweeting about Magic, more people who will occasionally tune in and watch the Pro Tour. All of these things are fabulous for your game and will, if nurtured over time, have a huge impact on your bottom line. Also, you have to remember that Pauper could be the thing that Wizards has needed forever but is neglected to take care of, which is a really good entryway into Magic the Gathering. We have various types of introductory products, and some of them are fun, they're okay, but what happens is, if you get into a format, well, I guess you're not even really getting into a format. If you buy a Challenger deck and you go to a store and you realize the only real Magic you can play is against another person with a Challenger deck, and hey, nobody has one. So you sit down and you play against someone who has a very tightly constructed deck, whether it's standard, modern, vintage, legacy, it really doesn't matter. Your Challenger deck is not going to stand up. You're just going to get blown out every time. And how does that feel? You buy a product that's supposed to help you get into playing Magic, only to find out that if you leave your kitchen table and playing with your buddy who got a deck with you, and you go to a store to, go a little deeper into Magic, well, you can't really play against anybody without getting destroyed. Like, maybe there's a couple of guys with casual decks, but odds are their casual decks are probably going to have some more broken cards than your Challenger deck's going to have, and you're still going to mostly just lose over and over and over. This is a problem. When you look at Pauper, granted, I don't know that there will ever be Pauper decks that Wizards just sells over the counter, and I'm not even sure that they should. This could be something that WotC could just leave to stores, and stores could get more money and benefit out of it. And let's be frank, that would be great, because Wizards has been really acting like they could care less about local game shops. I mean, Wizards could actually come out and say, we don't care about local game stores, and it wouldn't be a more clear message than the actions that they've been taking in terms of sending Iconic Masters to Walmart and various other steps that they've been taking that is increasing a lot of these smaller local game shops. So if some of these local game shops could actually build and sell Pauper decks to newer players and actually get money back on various commons and whatnot that they have in stock, that would be good. And if you're a new player who buys a Pauper deck and you can play with friends and then go to a tournament on a Thursday, even if you're going to lose because you don't know all the right plays to make or whatever, at least you can feel more like you're in the game. You're playing with a real deck within that format. people could make comments, well, Pauper is just a junior leaguer format or whatever, but I think you'll find a lot of spikes who are going to play Pauper, because Pauper, when you actually see how the gameplay works out in the format, is very much a spike-friendly format. It's all about making, you know, your 2-2 crash across and get to the red zone more times than your opponent's 2-2 creature can, and using your removal correctly and getting your end of turn sequencing done right, and all these little nuances add up, because there's not just you can't literally play Wrath of God or Damnation. You're not going to be able to generally play out your incredibly broken Splinter Twin combo. There's some good synergistic combos in Pauper. There's some good strong things you can do. The format isn't without powerful effects, but you can't. It's much more difficult to get really far behind and come back in Pauper. You can do it in some situations, but it doesn't happen as much. So those little incremental decisions matter a lot. A lot of spiky players will end up playing Pauper and really enjoying it, because the decision making and proper play matters so much in the format. So my point there is just that when people come around and they say, well, you're playing Pauper, to a new player, and they kind of try to act condescending like Pauper's not a really serious format, they're probably going to get some browbeating right back from some of the serious spikes who tell that person that they're an idiot, and if they want to sit down and play, they're going to get their butt kicked in any format, because a lot of spikes will be playing in different formats. And I'm just saying that it's going to be, you're not going to feel as much like when a new player comes in, he's not going to feel like he's not a legitimate member of the community. When you show up to a game shop with a challenger deck or whatever, you're not going to feel like a legitimate member of the community, because you can't really play with the other players. And it's not just a matter of winning and losing, it's a matter of getting blown out to such an absurd extent that you don't even feel like you're playing the same game. Whereas with the Pauper format, you find a $50 deck you can buy, and you're willing, maybe there's some people out there who are a lot more willing to spend $50 to dip their toe into Magic and try it out than to spend $500 or $300. So more new people do that. And then they show up and there's events they can actually play in with this little introductory deck that they've bought that's a real deck within a real format. And then they feel like they're a real member of the community. Maybe they only win 20% of their games because they're new, but they have more of a feeling that, hey, I'm in this thing. I'm actually a competitor. I actually won a few games here and there, and I was in the game in a lot of these things. I see I made some mistakes. I can get better at this. They could feel more like it's within grasp. And when that happens, you're more likely to get more new players coming in, and those new players actually sticking around. And the benefits of Pauper go on and on and on and on and on. And we're just getting started here, folks. The real key is going to be whether or not Wizards will come around and sanction Pauper. If they do, the sky is the limit. Pauper is going to be such an important format for Wizards going forward. If they sanction it, it's going to be like a sweet backbone format that's going to do a lot of good for Wizards. And it's also not something where you have to really worry about losing modern players to Pauper. There might be modern players who also play Pauper, but no one's just, well, I shouldn't say no one. Very few people are just going to quit Modern and say, that's it, I'm done with Modern, I'm just going to play Pauper. That's not going to happen. They're two very different formats that bring different things to the table. And this is good because Wizards doesn't have to worry about, and shops don't have to worry about losing out on selling the big time singles. It's just this is going to be a supplemental thing that'll bring in more new players and give more Magic players more engagement, so that there will be more players around who will buy more of those expensive cards. And once Wizards figures this out, hopefully if they ever do, again thank you to the professor, then it's going to be great for everybody. Pauper is not a flash in the pan, it's an incredible asset if Wizards would use it correctly. But only time will tell if we get there. In the meantime though, if you really dig in, if you really look at and understand what's going on right now, you're gonna easily find out that the people that are talking about how Pauper's nothing, it's all just hype from the professor pushing this, they're completely wrong. And just watch, because time's going to prove me to be correct. Now, if Wizards does not make Pauper a real sanctioned format, it's never really going to explode like it could. But even without Wizards, just based on the casual play and side event action and whatnot, I would say Pauper may not be able to stay at this level of popularity forever, but it's going to be a solid format that people will be playing and tinkering with over this next year. It's not just going to be a flash in the pan. And even going into the distant future, there have always been Pauper players, there always will be. It's just that question about sanctioning. And frankly, I could see it going either way, because with the professor pushing the cause, Pauper has a real chance to get sanctioned. However, Wizards does tend to make a lot of really dumb decisions, so we can never really discount or fail to factor in Wizards' ability to take a really good situation that could benefit them a lot and completely do the stupid wrong thing. They're very good at that. So we'll see how it all unfolds. And for anybody who actually checked out this video, feel free to leave a comment, tell me something I can improve, a subject matter that you would like to hear some conversation on, and we'll look into that. Thanks.